some insight that occurred when I was contemplating this morning. I don't mean to sound like I was like I'm sitting like on a cave in a mountain like contemplating serene thoughts. I was really just taking out the trash with a lot of time on my hands because I got some repairs being done on some equipment that I use, and the warranty is taking their sweet time, but it is getting done. But I just had a little more time that I know what to do with, so I was actually righteous enough to start cleaning up a little bit around where I live. And I live single, and I don't really do too much of anything outside of like make content, like do a little music, and get after like independent work. I forgot, I don't know where I was going with that, but so I don't really do a lot, but somehow do or don't do anything, and a mess is gonna follow you somehow. But it almost seems like messes. I don't even remember doing that much stuff. It just seems like messes just make themselves. But that just shows you that maybe we're not as conscious as we think we are. So even as we think we're not doing too much of anything consciously, maybe unconsciously and consciously we're doing more than we had thought. And we actually only remember so much of our day or our hour or our half a day, as we think we have an awareness of what we just said and did. We maybe actually still only get like the main point. And we soon forget a lot of things that we said and did, even if it's like moving this here or there. But I had a map. One of my actually only my one of the only like real relationships I had in my life, like a real love relationship, was a girl in high school. To be through most of the first half of high school, and we met the second half of ninth grade, and she was we just had a really brilliant a relationship. And shout out to that woman if she checks this out, because we still keep up with each other a little bit, but I don't try to sweat her or anything. But some of your real relationships, they kind of like they more so they more so are like something that moves in your life. And like this woman was a she was a beautiful person. She's a beautiful person now and then, but she took an interest in me, liking to me, that was really quite unique, and I could feel that with her. And she also she just really appreciated me as a human being, even as a boy and a child. And she had I think she had an appreciation for things about me that might not have been conscious about myself. And I think that might be some of your really deepest connections with people. It's not only the chemistry, because I've said in other videos is that I think that um, um, for in a male female dynamic, and I'm not saying that a female has to be what was considered a female at birth, but a feminine female being, I think, is helpful in assisting by nature, and they actually assist with some of your swagger and your banter and your ideas and your intellect and your humor and whatnot, where you think you're being more and more funny, but it's actually their love for you that's kind of setting you up with softballs. I once had my parents didn't attend a lot of my games because my mom was busy at work, and my dad didn't know what the hell was going on at that time. Sometimes I go past schools that I actually attended. Like I'll go past my actual middle school, that could also be called as some you can maybe call it both Hades and heaven, because there was some of the most daunting aspects of my the hardest, I think, maybe to this point, the hardest things I did in life were YAFL, Youth American Football League, in fourth grade. This badass friend and security guard that I lived at a family housing place for a university, because my father's in graduate school, and there was this the security guard who would hold down the place, the apartment place in the middle of the night, like on a bicycle, like study and then ride his bicycle 2, 3, 4 a.m. around a housing complex, like maybe like 200 families. And in a it was in a it was in a real ass place, like in the Southwest. And that place was that place is a real ass place. It's not wicked in itself, but it's a real ass place, and real ass things can happen a lot. But I would say that even in a real ass place, they have respect for family and children. So I don't think anyone was like looking to like fuck up around that place. But it was still yet a lot of vulnerable families, like in a real ass place in real ass times when life is real. But a lot didn't go down that could have went down based on the location and the time frame. And part of that was because of the fencing, but it's also part of like the presence of this man, or people like this man. And he was just a badass. He was more of a badass on a bicycle than I think a person would like look like maybe like on a motorcycle or a fancy car. As dope as those are, he was just something of a badass on a bicycle. But he was just like he was almost like had a military bearing where like as he'd be talking with my father, his body would be communicating a lot of strength and respect for himself and my father and myself as a child, getting more time on my hands past curfew because they were talking. But he took an interest in me and he recommended that I play Youth American Football League, going into from fourth going into fifth grade, and that shit was hard. But it was also in that city, that real ass place in the south. It's at a very high altitude. That place, I think some of our great fighters and runners have come from that area, and they still go there. And if you can be an athlete of any kind, like I went back there in college when I had become I become a connoisseur of running in college because of some military people that I met that I wasn't associated with them, but they trained me as a runner, and to where I was more so. You become trained when you enjoy something and you're better at it alone. That training is more like training of any kind. I think should be an initiation and an introduction, and the real thing is you and the work or you and the craft. But I went there to that city as an adult, being in strong shape as a percentile with respect to my cohorts and peers at that age. I wasn't the greatest of runners, but I was a pretty strong runner. And I go back to that city as an adult, thinking that it's gonna be cool to go for a run, and I make like a block and a half, and I'm about to fall over dead like a horse, like a righteous horse that just did some righteous stuff, and it's about to fall out dead because it spent itself. That's how I felt running about maybe 2 or 3 blocks in that place because of the altitude. So with that being said, football is difficult, even for children, because they were serious about that. Those coaches, like all their boys, like they damn it wanted their boys to be like better than NFL players, and they were on track to do that. I don't know what became of those kids that I grew up with, but that was some real stuff. And those parents were they were almost a little bit more, because we were being trained by the parents who had like football backgrounds themselves, and they were kind of like living through their children and living through the children that would be around their children. And they were so serious about football in fourth and fifth grade in the city at high altitude. And it was like the first practice. Like what was harder than the practice season was the first introduction, like the first week when they're figuring out who's going to be quarterback, who's not, what the hell is football, what the hell is standing in line, and then getting and then like squaring off with a lineman. And actually the more the boys of like a smaller frame, like I think they call it spelt, like wiry small frame, they hurt when you had to like square off with them. Like they put me in between a lineman and so they figured out that I was actually good at tackling people. Like they did this drill where I tackled this kid, and the coach was like, "Damn, hey, do that again." He's like, "Hey, watch this. Hey, tackle his ass." Like, okay, you go, tackle his ass. But I sometimes like you do some cold stuff when you didn't even know what the hell you did, and sometimes you're better untrained. And then when I was trying to impress him, I wasn't as good at it. But then in another game, like I had some for some reason I had some real ass friends in life when I was a kid, like, and there's still some real Emmer efforts. But even as kids, like we were some real ass friends, like as kids. So one of my dear friends of childhood, I got back out there to see him a couple times, like in middle school after I moved. But he got out to some of my games. Like he kept up with me in my games, and he would bring like his sisters to my game. And there was a game where I sacked the quarterback, and I was like for some reason the best thing I was at in life was like creeping up on people. Like in some basketball tournaments, there was like some bad type players that were like way older, and I could always get up behind them and steal the ball, and they didn't know that I had been there. And it was kind of similar on the football field when I would do stuff like that. But all I meant to say is that when we were at that initial introduction to football, I thought it's about to be fame and glory right away. Like I always had fun playing touch football, and I knew people were faster than me, but somehow I still felt fast like a cheetah, like all kids. But we get to that first training, and that stuff is for real. But it was the smaller, wiry, like more efficient boys that hurt to go up against. So that kind of showed me a little bit about the difference between power and strength, or power and bulk. But the realest things I did in life were that football as a boy for between fourth and fifth grade, and my dad made sure that I got all the way through that season because I damn it wanted to quit. And I had another friend who I was friends with, and then he moved away, and he was back right about the time we were wrapping up that season. Like we made it somewhere into like the playoffs or the finals for the city. I don't know how that was actually organized because I was too young to understand it. But my friend got out there and he was cool, and he checked it out too. My other friend, who had actually I had met the cool other friend through them two being friends. They were older than me, and they were friends like from some school that I didn't go to, but I became good friends with both of them. And one of their fathers was a friend of my father in the same line of work. But this at the end of the season, like the last couple games, like because it meant the season is over. So my dad wouldn't let me quit that, and it was so hardcore that training that I became stronger from it. But I found more of a love for basketball at that time, and I came across like some cool documentaries about Jordan and Grant Hill. I was just really interested in basketball, and it was taking time away from basketball and time away from being a kid. And that was like some real hardcore stuff. The practice was way harder than the games. That practice, I don't know if that was like maybe 3 or 4 months of daily practice, maybe weekends too, and no single one of those practices was easy to get through. And I'm still sitting pretty as a grown man near damn about close to the number 4 again, having the number 4 in my name again. And I'm still sitting pretty, not having to be subjected to that right now. Even as much as I still love fitness and intensity, I'm still sitting pretty, not being in those practices. But as the season was about to wind down, like if the game was over, that meant the season was over, and that meant that my parents wouldn't drag me there. So we failed, and like the other boys who like believed in that stuff, like they were getting emotional, they were crying. They were already hardcore and badasses, like as with yet a year or two of elementary left, but they were emotional, and they were distraught, and they were defeated, and they were disheartened by losing, and they probably became great after that, and they probably played other seasons. But I was actually they were crying, some of them were crying, and I wasn't sure if I was giddy or laughing or maybe about to cry, and I was like trying to play off like how upbeat I was about the season being over, like to get. And a lot of them were really assholes, to be honest. Some of your athletic types as children, even they're really something of assholes at a very young age, and I think they can be great from that, but they're also distasteful even to one another, and maybe that's why they can't get along. But also athletes can have deep friendships and bonds, and I don't mean to speak against that either. And these sports, they make us better. But all I meant to say is that I think that experience, it made me stronger in life. And then my other daunting experience was middle school, because middle school was I was actually had some success as basketball, but middle school it was forging my identity, it was forging who I would become as the football, and it was difficult, more so socially difficult. The football was physically difficult and a little bit socially difficult, but the middle school was socially difficult but physically fun, because I had a lot of fun, like in like PE and sports in middle school. But it was both heaven and hell middle school, and I had a lot of profound experiences in middle school. I almost think that my childhood was way more of an experience than my adulthood. A lot of my adulthood has been like mundane, and like there's some cool stuff in adulthood that you can do that you can't necessarily do when you're a kid, like experiences and maybe substances that you're privy to, and then like a little bit of scope of mobility and freedom, for lack of a better word, with like transportation. But even with that, I say that the experiences of childhood are way realer, deeper, funner, richer. It was just a different reality as a child, and it was also the '90s, and the '90s were dope. So I lived one. So I lived half of 4 years in the. I lived. So I lived the last half of the '80s as a child, the complete '90s for 10 years, and then the first half of the 2000s to put my development squarely in the '90s, with whatever of childhood is less than 10 years. I spent that equally leading up to and following the '90s, and then the rest of my childhood was centered in the '90s. But I still think the deepest experiences, for me at least, were childhood. And I don't mean to be like I don't mean to be it's something a little bit juvenile to attempt to re-experience or re-enter childhood as an adult. But I think that actually the deeper dimensions of what we are as beings, as is experienced in childhood, I don't think we ever have to dispense with that or be sheared of that, as long as we're honest and we don't put on pretensions and airs. So you can still be something of as vital and dynamic as a child, yet as what's being called four, three, or two, or three, or four, or five, or six, and with a zero behind it. And you don't necessarily have to be a different person, nor can you be a different person than what you were as a child. And sometimes, I had an epiphany when I was a young person, just starting to be called an adult, though no one respected me as an adult then, and a lot don't now. And I appreciated that. If you were to like scare the hell out of someone, like really scare someone, maybe have someone a lot of fun, but to really scare someone, you would probably drop a lot of, you might still have an identity as an adult, and I don't want to figure that one out if I heaven forbid. But I think that when you're really put on your heels, or maybe you experience like a healing or medicinal substance that really kind of checks you and enlightens you, you would experience yourself as similar to, like, I think the most mature you can be, and also the most effective you can be, would be like the maturity of like what's called a lad. So you have like a baby, a toddler, a boy, an adolescent, and then a lad. And I think that a lad is like, this is, I'm kind of appropriating vernacular from like maybe different cultures like Europe. And I'm somewhat from those cultures, but I'm not properly reared in Europe with those cultures as those words have been used. But I think that lad would be like, my understanding of the word lad is like, you're not entirely a boy, and you're not entirely a man. But if you had been out hunting with your brothers, your cousins, your uncles, your father, and then like there had been a problem, like either with an animal or another group similar to your group, and you were able to account for yourselves and maybe get over on some of them, those other boys, men, lads, and you get the point when you're going from a boy to be able to become a factor in life on some account, like you're actually competent to do something that can have impact to both children, lads, and adults. At that point, I think you're called a lad right there, and I think that that's actually one of the more, maybe the further maturity of that aspect is maybe the deeper effectiveness and fortitude of a male being that would be possible. I'm not saying a lad could contend with a grown man necessarily, but I still think that I feeling as impressionable, open-minded, yet also a little bit daring and intrepid, and maybe a little bit tactful, and just a little bit of wisdom. I think sometimes the more naive and juvenile wisdom might sometimes be as potent as something that's like seasoned. But I could be corrected on that. But all I meant to say is that state of mind, I think I recognize that state of mind when I was a very young person, and I recognize that I might be stronger suited to continue to embrace that state of mind. And right around that time, I had a manager at my first job, which was like a style associate at a shoe store, and that was like one of the best moves I could have ever made in life, was to get that job, because it got me comfortable engaging people that didn't look like me, and like so I could, like, when I was at that age, at the end of high school, I couldn't imagine going up to like a young man. Like, I'm just barely to be called a man. I couldn't imagine going up to like a cool person and his girlfriend and like talking to them about like shoes or selling something, and being cool around them and not being a little bit intimidated or awkward or feel like a fifth wheel. That's how I felt as a young person. But then after doing that job and experiencing life, I think I can feel comfortable around like a situation like that, or just another similar situation where it might be daunting, like to approach, to come at that, like, would feel like confidence. And I so much don't appreciate the word confidence, because it kind of sounds like an accomplishment, or like a special entitlement. But I just think that just more so embracing and working with and getting coordinated with who and what you are, to the point of being effective, and then maybe not experiencing. I think maybe you could say that all confidence is stepping out of your comfort zone to the point where you develop a little bit of comfort with new situations, with learning new things, with feeling new things, with saying new things, with doing new things, with trying new things, with understanding new things, with recognizing new things, with respecting new things, with dispensing with new things, with challenging new things, with checking things, with being checked by things, all that type of stuff and more is what amounts to what is referred to as confidence. But I think that if you were to appreciate it as a static point that is over with and done with and it's now settled in yours, or you walk into a situation and you expect to be confident because you've been confident before, so therefore you already won this situation. You won that one back there, so now therefore you already won that one and that one that you haven't made it to yet. That is maybe overconfidence, but just getting a little bit, but actually seeing yourself get past things that you didn't know how you're about to get past that, or how you may have gotten into it enough that you can be fairly acquainted with what that is, and then you can be so much so that if you were to understand that may or may not happen again, you wouldn't flinch the same way you would flinch if you hadn't been over that type of terrain before, is what I think is like confidence. But I had this manager there who was like shrewd. So that's like a business type, a person who makes calculated, cold, efficient business moves. And he gets over on business by making by being it's like a form of like being not frugal might not be the right word, but it's like a form of discipline in one of the umpteenth degrees of discipline, and just being very reasoned, measured, calculated, efficient, and also a little bit cold and ruthless. And you could appreciate all that in his tone of voice, and actually his eyes looked like that. He had this he looked like a killer, and he sounded like a killer, but he had a lot of heart and compassion, and that's one of the really deep things. I've met a few people who are the most formidable people that I've met in life, have also been the kindest and most compassionate, in some strange paradox. I said that it's a little bit of a paradox how a military person can stand with some of the most dignity, discipline, and valor and honor if they're right going, and then they can also get down dirty, low, and crawl and get mean and nasty equally so. And that's a paradox right there, and it's dynamic, and it's kind of profound, in a lesson about what this reality is. When you see like a dynamic paradox where two different contrasting things are, two different aspects of this reality are combined in the same figure or experience, that's something of a lesson that speaks to what this experience may or may not be, and you see it in that. But I also see the same thing in sometimes the kindest people and the most compassionate are also equally the most formidable, and he was an example of one of those. And he said some cool things to me over time, and he was like, he once told me when I was at that young, impressionable phase of development, he said never be all grown up, and that's still one of the deepest lessons that I got in life, is that he wasn't wanting me not to be a professional, show up to work on time, conduct myself like an adult and as a man, and I greatly did that, like even at that young age. That was one of my strong suits, has been just to show up to a place where I'm drawing like a paycheck, like when I'm asked to be there. I've always been fairly spot on about that, if there wasn't some mitigating circumstance or bad acting influence present. But but so he wasn't saying he was the shrewd of the shrewd. He was a clever, discreet, chaste, meek business killer is what he was. But he said don't never be all grown up. And so I really appreciated him for that, and it helped me to embrace that experience of maybe a lad wouldn't be the most strong frame for a male, but something of, if you could combine maybe the humility and also the daring courage of a lad, because I think lads do have a unique courage. Sometimes they say that when very young men are in military, they're almost more brave than can be appreciated, because they don't, it's been said that they don't have a true taste of the fact that life is mortal, and you can actually die, and death might actually mean death. Some would say that very young males, maybe females too, are they're a little bit idealistic and impressionable, and they haven't had their ideals. They haven't seen idealism fail yet. They haven't seen beautiful ideas and approaches and intentions fail flat out yet. And then they some would say that tasting seeing idealism come up short, and also seeing that appreciating vitality and mortality, it comes with seasoning. And so therefore a seasoned person might be a little bit more careful of their welfare and their health and their life and their resources and their strength and their ammunition and so forth. So and I think that there's maybe a little bit of truth on both of that. And when I was at that young age, I spent some time around men who were more mature than a young person would be privy to. There was a father of an influential family where I live. The family has a lot of outstanding and excellent members, and I lived very close to them for a couple of decades, and I had some experiences in contact with the different members of that family, and I took very deep lessons that served me well just by observing them, all the members of that family. And we also attended the same church for a while, and we had been involved in sports together as children. But that I was around that man, and he's a seasoned man. And I was part of a ministry, like a parking lot ministry in a church. So I was around him. I was around some other men who had different like street backgrounds. Some of them more so like they had alternative sexual lifestyles, or maybe criminal lifestyles, and then or a combination of those or none of those, and then just different seasoned men, still vital men, like in your late 20s, 30s, and maybe early 40s. But when I would be around them, like the way that they would eat food, like when we're kids, we're digging in, and it's like, oh yeah, gummy bears, okay, Gushers, fruit roll up, your good cereal, stuff like that. We're like, yeah, good to go. But like you get around these men, and they're like, oh, what you got over there? You got some carrots? Okay, you got. Let me get that salad over there. You got. Let me get that juice with the less sugar right there. No, I'm not trying to touch that pork. And so they're more careful about what they're putting into their body, and they're actually experiencing their body as though we're sitting right here, right now, and we're not guaranteed to be here this afternoon, tomorrow, or next day. But as we handle and look after this moment, no less than what we're choosing to eat, they looked, the men of experience, they looked more mortal somehow. They looked more vital. I remember that family friend, he did something like, he was at a table, and he did something with his hand where he was like, and like I could see like his hands look like sometimes you can actually see our own cells when you look at our hand, and I could appreciate that, like a human being was one. They say like your reptile brain, and sometimes if you look at our body, every once in a while you look at a human being that you're around, and you can see something of the history of our existence, which is not different. I don't think that we're different than what our ancestors have been and are, and that we're really, when you're talking to a human being, you're talking to something that is as ancient as the universe and has abided, living, organic somehow, as far of an expanse as what we appreciate of the existence is, at least not the experience of our line of heritage as humans, mammals, and reptiles to this point, and we're still alive and breathing that far to this point. Yet we're not guaranteed to do so in another minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, month, day, week, month, year, decade, so forth in itself. And I still think those time references are arbitrary in the first place, but still, that we've come this far and we're vital and we're yet fallible and mortal is a deep thing to appreciate. And sometimes when you look at a human being, you can see something of our existence, where you see someone and you can see a little bit of the resemblance that we have to different grades of mammals. Or you see, sometimes I see this in people's eyes, like when sometimes you see that, like when you look at people's eyes and you're like, yeah, you can appreciate we were reptiles in the first place if we're not still reptiles of some kind. And you look at a person's eyes, and it's that beautiful, deep, and cold as like a reptile. And you see that sometimes. But so with this person, he made a gesture with his hand, and I could just appreciate something of the fact that we're reptiles and mammals and mortal and fallible and profound and ancient and delicate and precious. I saw that in him, and that was a little bit of a maturity, and I think that might be different between like a man of seasoning and a lad, like I'm talking about. But I think that there's a strength in both, because sometimes the lad is not pretentious, and they are like they can on some degree appreciate that they can die as anyone else, and some of them still wouldn't flinch if it was about something they love. What would you be more daunted by? A comfortable man who's like maybe is like late 20s or 30s, that is having somehow you're at loggerheads with, or a young lad, 14, 15, 16, 17, like 18, sticking up for a family member, about something righteous. What would be more hardcore? I think something of the lad might be hardcore, but the more seasoned person might be more deadly and more wise and more efficient and more crafty. So you can't. I think it's just maybe like a spectrum. So you have the formidableness, the pure instincts, and the creativity of a young person, and then you have a lot of that in a seasoned person, and is different. It's different dynamics, and both can be as formidable and deadly, or beautiful and enlightening. But it's just like different grades of a spectrum, and there's value at all the different grades of a spectrum, no less or greater the one than the other. And I also think that our maturing is like that, where I think the existence is funnily unified, so much so that it's unified and dynamic, collective and respective, heterogeneous and homogeneous. I borrowed from Arthur Avalon with that statement. So much so that things like a unity would be actually a redundant term in the deepest sense of what is referred to with that term. Is that it's more so than that term approaches, but it but in such that I think that to say age is a little bit arbitrary, because it makes it sound as though one conception of a life is occurring at a different point than another conception of life, if not the conception of the universe. And without a reference, a time reference, I don't think that there's a appreciable difference in when or where any two conceptions occur, if there is such a thing as the number two or a dual conceptions. I think that in ultimate terms, in ultimate experience, those are not independent. It would appear so from a limited mortal standpoint, but infallible standpoint. But I think that in free terms, there's not a difference in the conception of the universe or a human being, or the reconception of a universe or a human being, or many infinite reconceptions. That so that age is arbitrary. They say carbon dating, but I don't know that. So that whatever you're using to carbon date something, I don't know that has existed any less than what you're dating, because they say that energy is you cannot create nor destroy energy. It can only change. So from that standpoint, nothing has been created or uncreated in the first place. And if it had been, it is no different than anything else. I don't know that water that's sitting over there is any different than this guitar case in ultimate terms, in chemical terms. It may just be it might have abided in those bonds that we appreciate as being an object, an existent object. The only thing that's real is the wavelengths, the circles, the wavelengths, and the rhythm is what is appreciated superficially as an object. And those wavelengths and rhythm in those particular bonds is what's unique and characterize something as the bonds. Those bonds may have abided as those bonds differently and at a different rhythm and table than what's called the guitar case. But in ultimate sense, in free sense, I don't know that there's any appreciable difference. It's as though one could be of a different age, but things can be of a different position within cycles, because I think we abide within cycles. We are a function of cycles. You cannot say, do, or think anything outside of a function of a circle, or circles upon circles and within circles. And we're something to interject and supersede and intervene one of those circles or all of those circles. That yet is a function of another form of circle in cycle, because it's been said that nothing may proceed or exist or abide as a straight line whatsoever in reality, um, and stay that way, because I think it'll be checked by reality, because reality simply does not exist, abide, or behave in a linear fashion at any point. So we are limited by anything that is fashioned, fancied, appreciated, or understood to be linear. No less than ourselves, our age, our sense of time and space. I don't think anything gains by the conception of a straight, linear, arbitrary, preconceived notion of progression, no less than age. However, the cycles are yet profound, and more so profound even than some of the names that we take, because we exist within, I think, thought, religious, and intellectual, religious, and expressive freedom, ostensibly to different degrees in different contexts, but we can yet choose to take different names in our mouth, or worship, or genuflect to different names, honor different names, and we have a little bit of freedom to choose what name, or even to interchange what name, and somewhere a little bit, maybe even appropriate, or combine different heritages and names, is what we have a little bit of license to do that. The Great Order, Osho, did a lot of that in some of his discourses, where he was very liberal about the sources that he drew from, and also the sources that he honored. That hadn't been blasphemy, but to interfere with the cycles that are about us, I think, is a degree of blasphemy. So whether that be the financial cycles that are about us, the human development cycles, the value relationships in terms of profit and investing. Did we invest labor? Did we receive profit not having uploaded labor and investment? I think that any of these real cycles that are somewhat reflected, like in the Constitution, the checks and balances that Tashri Bey has said has been appropriated from at least the honestly known as the Iroquois Indian, and would amount to is something harmonic or not. So I've said that I think that reality is attended by, facilitated by chemistry, and that that can be appreciated in terms of romance, that can be appreciated in terms of positive and negative, that can be appreciated in terms of things like diastole and systole, and that can be appreciated in terms of energy, that can be appreciated in terms of sound, and then both the energy and the sound can be appreciated in terms of cycles of vibrations, and cyclical motion, and then and which can amount to rhythm, and then when you have multiple rhythm, it's now timing, and then that can be reduced to consonant and vowel sound, like a static, a static and a dynamic motion, which Arthur Avalon said that all motion is a function of both static and kinetic. You cannot have kinetic without static, and static without kinetic, I don't think, according to Arthur Avalon. And then finer is ohm, is the fundamental unit of sound, and all sounds are a function and contained within the sound ohm, the three letters AUM, ohm. And then that is a function of the silent mantra that the universe recites, that living being recites, the Ahapa mantra, that is no less than breathing. And then that is again life and death, I think, systole and diastole. And then that deeper is bond, is the single unit, is simple bond, and word. Word is bond, life is logos. Word and idea, thought and idea, thought and agreement. Maybe the better word would say expression and agreement is logos, and that is bond, and that is the single unit, the single unity of existence. But I was getting a little bit off with that one. Is that I was saying that so I said that much to say that my dad didn't know where I went to middle school, and so one time we drove by middle school, where I went to middle school, and he's like, "What's that building there?" Just to show you where my parent was. But my mom attended one of my games, and I think that she loved me, and I had like one of my more I was on fire on that game, and I couldn't miss, and I couldn't mess up in that game, and I was getting slaps on the butt from the captains of the team, and I was having a rank the next day and clout at school, and I think it's because of the love and presence of my mother. And also in high school, I had a female friend who was she believed in me, and I was cooler around her. But I wanted to say that